Kids can be scared of anything, and the only thing that brings more fear to our hearts is media. Not necessarily, but it does happen, and I've had my own experience where I used to be scared of the most ridiculous things that I look back on and think, wow, that's uncanny. Some of them don't scare me today, while others still do. Now, without further ado, this is the top 17 pieces of media that scared me at a young age. I was obsessed with the Gruffalo story as a kid, and when the movie came out in December of 2009, I was thrilled to see it. I did love the style, the music, and the designs of the characters, but there was one scene that absolutely scared me as a kid. It's where the mouse is walking through the woods, talking to himself until he sees the Gruffalo, looks up at him, and then abruptly cuts to the scene with the Gruffalo looking down at him. Yep, and this is it. This is the scene that sent me running off, kicking and screaming. And I've never watched the film ever since. Up until 3 years later, when I rewatched it and ended up loving it again. Shark Tale is renowned for being one of DreamWorks' weakest movies. With the massive amount of pop culture references and the creepy, disturbing-looking characters, it would be an understatement as to why I was scared of it. But there was only one scene in the film that surprisingly scared me. And it all started at the beginning of the movie where everyone was singing Don't Worry, and it cut to a scene with a sushi restaurant with a guy sitting in it, giving off an almost creepy, disturbing-looking face. Nowadays, I find this particular scene to be creepy but manageable. So yeah, I'm not really scared of it no more. Alf the Alien is really obscure these days. From 1986 to 1990, the show was a huge hit. In 2018, I was interested in him, but years ago, my mum gave me a toy of him and I was immediately creeped out. He reminded me of Roly Mole, but nowhere near as cute. Instead, he was downright unnerving for me. With his bulky nose, big teeth and coal-piercing eyes, he was absolutely uncanny. Even though he doesn't bother me today, I still remember those awful nightmares I had. It won't be a surprise that one of the most iconic scenes from this movie actually traumatized me. The famed Godfather has been captivating people for 50 years. We all remember the horse's head scene, and it's here when I had my doubts about Godfather. Coupled with the creepy music and the design of the horse's head is still vaguely creepy to this day. Being one of Disney's most underrated films, I thought Dinosaur was a pretty fascinating movie altogether. At the start of the movie, we see all the dinosaurs grazing and laying their eggs when the little one is arsing around in the forest. This is when he encounters the carnotaur peeping through the bushes. When I was around 4 or 5 years of age, I couldn't really process what I was seeing in these bushes. I knew it was the carnotaur, but I couldn't clearly make out the features. But as I got older, I was able to see it more clearly, and by God, it gave me the spooks. Willy Wonka, a family movie that had a scene that scared me, but not just scared me, but also scared everyone else. It's where everyone jumps on a boat and they travel through a creepy, trippy-looking tunnel that shows off all these bizarre-looking pictures. There was a particular part in this scene that I couldn't quite focus on clearly, and it would be the scene where the chicken gets its head cut off by the cleaver. The clip scared me so bad that I refused to watch the movie up until I became a teenager. Tim Burton is renowned for his creepy yet charming content, and surprisingly, James and the Giant Peach is the only Tim Burton film that sent shivers down my spine. The film consists of stop-motion, anthropomorphic insects that accompany James on his adventure to New York City. The anthropomorphic characters were freakish in and on themselves, but the one that takes the cake would be the evil ghost rhino. The rhino ambushes James and his mates in a cloud that resembled the one from Child's Play. With the way he moved and the way he screamed is part of what made him such an unsettling character. Finding Nemo is an extremely wholesome movie with a very peculiar beginning. It starts with a couple, Marlin and Coral, who lay their eggs and protect them. After messing around with one another, Coral spots the barracuda lurking in the background. The barracuda swims over to them in an insanely fast manner, killing Coral and the eggs along with it. I was unable to go to the bathroom at night for weeks because it was such a disturbing character, with the creepy music and lack of speaking. Yeah. Gnomeo and Juliet is a movie that I used to love as a kid, but now looking back on it, I just don't really give a fuck about it. And you're probably thinking, what's so scary about it? Halfway through the film, Juliet opens the door to escape from the house, but as she's confronted by a grisly-looking dog staring down at her. I remembered skipping that scene constantly every time I watched Gnomeo and Juliet. Return of the Jedi is my number one Star Wars film. There was a scene in the film that I couldn't quite focus on clearly. I love the rancor scene more than anything, but there was one part in the scene where he eats the pig. At the time, I couldn't really comprehend what the rancor had in its hand, but when I realised it was the pig, shit did not go down well. With the crushing of the bone and the pig's screams, it really sent shivers down my spine. Horror movies do not really scare me as much nowadays, but believe it or not, Tremors was the only horror film that actually managed to scare me. It's about these two guys who try to solve the mystery behind all the slaughters until they find out that it's just a bunch of worms mutilating people. From the soundtracks to the grotesque murders, the film was a handful. Nowadays, I find the film interesting and I do watch it occasionally. If you've watched Animal X yourself, then it'd be quite an understatement as to why I was scared of it. The show has everything going for it. Grainy imagery, creepy looking characters, and a distorted narrator. If I were to have a good time in understanding creepy stuff, then I'd watch Monster Quest. But if I was going to put myself to the challenge, I'd put on Animal X. And this show really was scary. There wasn't just one thing in this movie that scared me, but two things. The woman is unpacking her groceries when she starts hearing roaring coming from her fridge. She opens the fridge and she's meted with a ghostly canine with glowing stuff in its mouth. But at the beginning of the movie, the Ghostbusters try to capture the scary old librarian woman until she all of a sudden changes into a hideous monstrosity. Fox and the Hound is a Disney film which focuses on two characters who were once mates but become enemies. It isn't really that much of a scary movie, but the climax of the film was. At least to me it was. It shows our main group of characters battling a black bear in the forest. I don't know about you lot, but that bear was fucking terrifying. Teletubbies is one of my childhood shows that focuses on these little alien-looking characters that have a lot of adventures. And at the end of a particular episode, they'll have like a special event where they show off all these cool stuff. One of them is where it shows off like a pink house, and inside it is this little puppet guy who sings a song. He was so unnerving due to his singing and loud voice and all that I kept telling me nan to turn off the TV. Pinocchio is an old dark movie with an incredibly fun story. Despite being aimed towards kids, Pinocchio does have its fair share of dark moments, and there was one of them that I could not really get past while watching the film. It's where the fox and the cat are talking with the coachman, and the coachman's saying he'll take all the kids to Pleasure Island and they'll never come back as boys. Then it drastically changes to where his face morphs into a devil. Ice Age, the classic comedy that had people crying of laughter, is what traumatised me as a kid. Not just one scene, but most of the scenes throughout the film. From scenes that gave me anxiety, to tragic backstories, to random scenes that felt exaggerated. Now I get that it's an old movie and the animation has obviously not aged well, but I do find it uncanny nonetheless. Now before I get to number one, I have these two honourable mentions. Child's Play 3, Chucky crushes a guy in a bin lorry and his hand is sticking out. The Mummy, From a guy losing his eyes and tongue to a beetle eating a man's inside, coupled with dramatic music. Here we are, we're at number 1, and you're all about to see which out of all 18 movies that has traumatised me and put the fear of God into my soul. Be prepared, everyone, as the number 1 show that scared me as a kid is Monsters Inside Me. Now, I have seen a lot of crazy shit on television before, and this beats all of it by a long shot. It's a documentary about viruses and parasites that infect people in the most brutal way possible. Although the facts are interesting, I couldn't even sit down for 5 minutes and watch a full episode from back to front. Even though it's a documentary makes it scary, but they start showing the insect's face up close, and it just made this show challenging to watch. All in all, this show was traumatic. It scared me as a kid and still vaguely scares me till today. That is all, folks, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.